Good afternoon. Good afternoon, and welcome to the Spokane Colleges Spring Quarter Town Hall. This meeting is being live streamed as well as being recorded. I'd like to welcome Mark Ramos to offer our native land acknowledgement.
Good afternoon. I'm going to put a little bit of spin on this when I do the land acknowledgement. So it goes as this. We are honored to acknowledge that the Spokane Colleges and our main campuses for Spokane Falls and Spokane Community College are located on the traditional sacred homelands of the Spokane Tribe of Indians, which are also known as Spokane, which means children of the sun. We also provide services in a region that includes the traditional and sacred homelands of the Coeur d'Alene, which means heart of the all. We are also known as Stichchumash, which means the people who were here before. Confederate tribes of the Colville Reservation, Kalispel Tribe of Indians, also known as Kalitzpi, which means the Camas people, and Nez Perce tribe, which means pierced nose, in their language, Nimipu, which means the rural people. We pay our respect to tribal elders, both past and present, as well as to all indigenous people today. This land holds their cultural DNA, and we are honored and grateful to be here on their traditional lands. We give thanks to the legacy of the original people and their descendants and pledge to honor their stewardship and values. Lem Lynch, thank you.
Thank you, Mark. Once again, welcome to the Spokane Colleges Spring Quarter Town Hall. And for our district and SCC colleagues, welcome to Spokane Falls Community College. Thank you for joining us on a bright, beautiful spring afternoon. Before we get started, I want to take the opportunity to remind us that it is graduation season. Many of our community graduations are happening right now. We've had a few, and we've got a few more coming up. And I want to offer an open invitation to all Spokane Colleges employees to attend our graduation ceremonies. Our commencement ceremony is not only a celebration of our students' success, it's also a celebration of all of the work we've put in as a collective to support our students to getting to that point. So I'd just like to remind you that our commencement ceremony for our main campuses is at the podium on June 15th. Spokane Falls will begin at 3 p.m., and Spokane Community College will begin at 7. And I'd like to invite all of you to come and attend, whether you've been to every single commencement since you started working here or you've never attended before. We'd love to see you there. With that, welcome to the Spring Quarter Town Hall. This is a wonderful opportunity to get to hear some cross-college and district updates from our chancellor, as well as an opportunity for all of us to engage in dialogue, conversation, and ask the burning questions that we have. And so we thank Dr. Brockbank for providing this opportunity for us to be able to get together and dialogue in this way. And with that, we will jump right in and get started. So please join me in welcoming our facilitator, Melanie Rose, and our chancellor, Dr. Kevin Brockbank.
Thank you, President McEachern. Welcome, everyone. Thank you all for being here. This is our final town hall of the academic year. Seems like it's gone by pretty fast. Our format today is similar to the last couple of town halls, designed for maximum Q&A time. We're going to start with brief remarks by the chancellor and then open it up for your questions. So be thinking about what you want to ask if you didn't already come with questions in mind. Since this is our last town hall of the academic year, we also want to include celebrations. So in addition to questions, if you have something you want to celebrate, please share that, because that's part of this event. I do have some questions teed up to keep the conversation going in case any of you are a little shy, but we will go until 2:30 today unless we run out of questions. And we're pretty sure that's not going to happen today. So with that, Chancellor Brockbank.
All right, thank you. And thanks everybody for being here. I always really appreciate having folks in the room, and I also appreciate the Zoom option for people who can't make it. And I'm not sure how many that is, but these are really important pieces of communication to me, just because I really value the difference between the verbal message versus the email kind of tone deaf, reread, type too many words in there. And so I'm really looking forward to it today. So I do have some notes today. Uncharacteristically, I normally not have notes, but the topics I want to cover today, I want to make sure I am clear exact on what I'm saying and that I don't miss a couple of things, so you'll see me using notes today for that purpose. So there's a lot of things we could talk about today. We could get back to mission, vision, and value statements and where that process is going. There's some staffing review things that have happened. The advocacy work we need to talk about going into the next legislative session, celebrations on campus. But also, of course, I'm going to have to talk about budget. I hate being the one that always brings that forward, but it's a priority today, and more so, we're talking about the priority of it in the coming years. And so, for anybody who's missed this discussion, which I think is probably very few of you, I just want to set the stage for what the actual problem statement is. And it starts with the fact that last year in June, so about 10 plus months ago, or July, I'm sorry, we were informed that the state allocation model, as it was revised, is going to be a reduction of, at that point, $7 million that will be graduated over 6 years. That number has changed. It's now almost $8 million. The point being is that we have at least $8 million at a minimum to reduce our operating budget of over the next 6 years. And we did that just now for the first year, so we have 5 more to go. We also will have legislative reductions that we can't predict yet, but we do know that the revenue forecasts and the spending do not match up in Olympia. We're not going to get rich in the next session. And then you can just talk about what happened this year where we had COLAs that were signed and mandated but not funded fully. So we've got kind of things coming from all different directions and quite a challenge there. So in the budget process this year, really was 2% cuts kind of across the board. It didn't really equal out that way. We did things that were strategic enough where we have different cuts in different places. And it was a little over $2 million in total. And those cuts, individual cuts and adjustments and changes that we all made at all 3 pillars, we will publish and distribute after the board approves that in June. So there will be a document that says, this is everything that happened in order to make that budget right. So that's the first part of it. And I do want to make sure I kind of provide some thanks and kudos, I guess, to all the people who worked really hard on that budget. Those are big cuts, and we're making decisions that are long-lasting in many cases. And we've done all the little tricks and twists, and I've said this many times, pulled the levers and stretched the rubber band to make this work. But now we're in a situation we need to look further ahead and say, we are in a position where I want to say this, that we're facing structural budget gaps that if we don't sufficiently address it, it's going to affect our ability to serve students appropriately, serve our community appropriately, and frankly, protect the positions and jobs and livelihoods of many of the people in the room. And so we're walking into something that's really serious, and we'll discuss how we're going to tackle that here in the moments, in the coming statements here. So, so over the course of the past year, we spent a lot of time stabilizing our financial position. That means we had to work on the analysis of difficult but necessary adjustments, including consolidations in some areas, looking at and evaluating duplicative services and tools, targeted expenses, and the primary goal is to minimize harm to students and to keep ourselves operationally fit, which I think we did a really pretty good job of. And during that time over the year, in particular, I would say we had some work groups that worked on consolidation and duplication and trying to reduce expenses, and it included basic student needs or workforce transitions, you can call it either. We had another one on dual enrollment and outreach, and the third one was the institutional effectiveness and institutional research. And because of vacancies and retirements in those areas, those were natural places to say, what would happen if we put that to the subject matter experts and said, what can we do given this opportunity that would help us going forward with the budget? And kudos to those groups too, really extensive reports, thorough, with different ideas and recommendations in there. But those of you who teach know that if you don't give really, really clear instructions, you get different kinds of products across the board. And we're in the process of reviewing that with those groups and realizing what we've learned during that time. And really what we've learned is we need to provide more clarity to the decision making on there, more focus on asking groups, how do we get there instead of giving them a blank slate and say, go do some magical thing that'll make us better later. And then I think we underestimated the human component of what we're looking at and some of the fears that people have. And I will use this quote probably a couple of times today. I love this thing I heard recently, which was, people are not afraid of change. People are afraid of loss. And in this case, I would say, and I'm speculating, people will feel the idea that if we consolidate something or something goes away, I'll lose my identity with a college, I'll lose my identity as a leader, I'll lose my positional authority, I'll lose work I've done over the years that I'm very proud of. Those things all contribute to how I address an issue and solve a problem. And I think that's really important for us going forward, is understanding how the individuals feel this work. So what's become pretty evident as well is that we need to now move from that short-term stabilization to intentional long-term redesign. And that shift requires not only shared vision where we're going, but also consistent and trustworthy way of making decisions together. And so what I'm talking about today, I've mentioned numerous times throughout the year, was the idea of working on a new decision-making model that will help us get through these challenging decisions, as well as working the strategic plan and implementing it along the way. So I'm going to read a couple of quotes of what the decision-making model will be intended to do, and then I'll give a vision statement that goes along with it. So in this new decision-making model, I believe it's going to create more clarity and participation as we work through complex issues. It's going to be designed to handle technical and adaptive challenges that impact 2 or more areas across the organization. And what that means is not every decision goes through there. There's plenty of places we don't need that. But if you're talking about cross-divisional things like an IT implementation, those are the kinds of things we need to have in there and have people from all areas. It's not going to... and then, I'm sorry. So as we get there going, here's the part that I talked about earlier of clarity. What we've seen in these responses and conversations with people is you can't ask people to solve a problem where there's not a clear goal. And so the clear goal, and I'm going to read this twice because this will be the topic of conversation, I think, for the majority of the day. The vision that that model will work off is, by fiscal year 2034, Spokane Colleges will operate as one integrated institution under single accreditation across multiple campuses, organized around student pathways rather than institutional borders. I'm going to read it again. By fiscal year 2034, Spokane Colleges will operate as one integrated institution under single accreditation across multiple campuses, organized around student pathways rather than institutional borders. And I've kind of walked around this for the last 10 months as a district. It's come up for decades. But at this point, we have a unique and perhaps the most challenging fiscal road in front of us. And the work that we do together on this will determine what that final vision looks like. If you read the statement, and it will get pushed out by Monday, I'll have the decision-making model documents and distributed to across the district. It's general in some ways for a reason, which is, as we go through this process and we say to you, how do we get there? How do we do this work? Those groups will pick out the ways we do it, the showstoppers we don't see, the risks, the rewards, and all those different things. And we're going to have to adjust along the way to get the perfect model in place. So I think the one thing that comes up a lot is a single accreditation. Single accreditation is the target, but there are a lot of really, really consequential questions about pursuing that or not pursuing that. But that's what the question we're going to ask, and that's what we're going to go work off of. So with that, I just want to kind of say, my goal today is to be as direct and transparent I can about where we are, what challenges we're facing, and how we want to move forward with them together. And I can talk again and again about the model, but I think the vision statement is where the focus is going to be today for the questions. Is Jason Eggerman here? There he is. I thought that was you, but it's just an outline of a guy sitting back there. I shared some of this with Jason yesterday, and he had a question for me, and I asked him to ask it here today. So I think I'm going to have him start because it it goes to what I think the core resistance has been about that conversation for the entire time I've been here. So Kim's running the microphone.
Jason's going to ask a question, and Kim's bringing the mic.
I hope Jason remembers what we talked about.
Yeah, in general, I know it was a rumor-based question. I know you love to address the rumors. And one of the things that I have heard periodically over the last year or so is that, there's this idea that the financial situation is pushing us towards a single institution, or this is driven by legislative priorities. But word on the street from various sources is that, since you got here, you've said things like, I don't understand why we're not a single institution, or I wish we were a single institution. So if you could, speak to that rumor or address that, this has kind of been a priority for a long time.
Yeah, and part of that's true, actually. So I did come here. I came from Salt Lake Community College, which was twice the size of our district. Was a single college with multiple locations across Salt Lake and the state of Utah. And I've heard the question a million times in the community too. And the response internally is this, which is that each college has a unique culture, offerings, climate, environment, a variety of different things. There's a variety of ways to offer it, but it's the uniqueness that comes up as the response. So I did say that when I came here. I want to, for the record, mention that was 11 years ago, and I've worked here intimately with many of you for the last 11 years. I understand what you're saying. The two colleges are different. There's a different culture in how they address challenges. There's a different culture in how they work with students. There's a different culture, and it's obvious. And those things are important to people. We talked about the human element earlier. What I would say, though, is if we were to work into this more of a concept of consolidation that would help us with fiscal challenges, those things that are important to you as uniqueness we need you to be the ones that help us determine what things need to be protected, what things need to be carried on, and what things are things that can be integrated together. The things that we do in this model, and when we start asking tough questions about structural changes, are going to be things that we co-create. And I would ask, at this point, I would say, if you believe that there's a uniqueness at the college you work at, if that's where you work, define for me what the uniqueness is that you can't sacrifice. And that will be different for all of you, because I've heard different answers to that over the years. But it's a recognized thing. I've been here long enough to see it and know it and appreciate it. You all will be the people who will help us in the model protect uniqueness at different campuses, different locations, and it will always exist. For example, Inchalum has a different kind of role than any other campus we have, and that will always be true. It will always be its own unique place. Spokane Falls will never be Spokane Community College, and vice versa. And I've said this a few times too, but I think it's very pointed, which is, for as long as I'm in this community and alive, basically, everybody's going to call this Spokane Falls, and everybody's going to call that SCC. How we populate administration and structure and how paperwork flows and who's a supervisor, they don't see that. They see this. And so I think we want to kind of keep those things in mind as we look at ways to get ourselves to the right organizational structure. And so the vision I just shared, back to Jason's specific question about one college model, is really simply under the auspice of, look, we can't afford to duplicate anything. If we consolidate in some places, we will save costs. And the only other way we do that, we can get to the bottom line in 2034, is through just really hard, unstrategic cuts every year, and those will be really, really hard. So I want us to be proactive, think about those things, but that's the starting point. Did that answer the question, Jason? Okay.
Okay. Who wants to go next? Is anyone in the room? Okay, Jeff's got an online question.
Thank you. Kind of along the lines, Do we foresee any additional property changes in the near future or site closures?
Yeah. We're looking at those all real closely, as I mentioned earlier in the year. President Martin just sent a message out to the entire district. Yeah, so we had been talking about the AEC and had kind of let the foundation know that was a possibility or likelihood that we would vacate that facility. That facility also has Head Start in it. So those are both going out, and then the date is a couple years out, so that's one. We're getting an analysis done on the Magnuson building about what that's worth, what a sale would be, and where we would put people from that facility. Or is it something we need to use to repurpose to generate revenue? Those are the most likely things to have happen. As far as rural sites go, I think we're as thin as we really want to be at this point. There's some real important political and sort of community-based reasons we need to be visible in each of those rural communities. And a great example is Walla Walla Community College just voted on to close their Clarkston campus, and it's gotten some statewide attention from legislators and media that shows that the rural stuff's important. I think SCC and SFCC both have put an emphasis on making those operations really important and improving the delivery there, and just they're ramping those things up to a better level, and I think we need to stay there. So those are important parts of our operation. I don't see any other internal or in-town sites necessarily that we're looking at, but so AEC and Magnuson are the two you'll see first. Then we kind of run out of big leases.
Okay. Other questions? Anything else online, Jeff?
Melody.
Oh, Mel's got one. Where's Kim? There she is.
Just real quick, back to the response that you gave, Jason. What's the significance of 2034?
That will be the fiscal year where we will not have any more allocation model adjustments. Fiscal year 34 will be the first year we won't have the mandated allocation adjustment. And the unknown part is all the variables in there about what's going to happen with the state legislature, what are going to be our costs, all of our unforeseen costs, just like at your home, your roof blows off and those types of things happen. But Jenny, it looks like she's got a response for it too.
I saw some faces when you said the minimum adjustment. So every single year there's an adjustment, and by 2034, that's the final year when the full amount is taken from the Spokane Colleges budget.
Yeah. So that number is really put out there to just say, like, look, we have multiple, 5 more times we have to do that adjustment on top of whatever comes out of Olympia. I've mentioned over and over again, I'm very concerned about Olympia this fall or next session. And at the last town hall, I did talk a lot about what happened in the last session, what the message was from the legislators, and the fact that we'd be doing some advocacy. And I just want to reiterate that again. There are going to be legislators on campus. We're going to tour them. We're going to walk them around. I'm going to bring them to events. I'm going to bring them to graduations. All those different things, because the thing they have to walk back to Olympia with is a very clear and concrete understanding of how much value our organization gives to our community, to those students, and frankly to our employees whose livelihood is tied to this institution. They cannot be under any other impression other than the one we give them of what the reality is. And so, and that will really kind of ramp up in the fall. There'll be some summer stuff, but and I'll reinforce this again, like, absolutely, we want them to be our friends, and we want them to understand how much we give to them. There is no better deal in state government than two-year education. And I will tell you this, too. All the federal legislative agenda around cutting programs that support individuals who have needs, what I've said in D.C. before is the cheapest, once again, the most inexpensive way to help people be self-supporting and moving ahead and advancing and successful and stuff this is the best start for education. Education is the great equalizer, always will be, and the easiest, most inexpensive, and accessible way to do that is the two-year education system, and that is what helps with those. And Head Start's a big part of that as well. So I'm going off a little bit on a different lobbying sort of attempt, but they have got to be here, and we've got to teach them the values they don't already see. So
Jeff's got an, oh, sorry.
Go ahead.
Jeff?
Sorry.
Yeah.
All right, two different questions. One is trying to follow up on the Magnuson comment. Are we leasing the building or do we own it?
We actually own that one.
Okay.
So we could sell it and we would retain some cash.
And then with the direction you discussed in becoming one institution, possibly I'm going to put in there, does this mean student services will centralize and employees may either shift or lose jobs?
Can you read the last part of that again?
Yeah. Does this mean student services will centralize and employees may either shift or lose jobs?
It means we will have a discussion about whether centralizing student services is the most efficient, effective, and beneficial way to structure our organization. And that's both how we do workflow and efficiency in work and what best serves students. So yes, it would be under discussion of how do we do that, right? And will employees lose jobs? I'm just going to be honest. If we're losing 11% of our revenue and we're 96% salaries, yes, there are going to be places where that's going to happen. We are actively working and have been for the last 10 months on each vacancy. Do we need it? How do we need it? Can we, hire it at a lower level? What can we do to not get to the point where we're actively walking out and having people who want to be here, who are great contributors, having to not be able to work here? And so I'll say this too. I talked about being real honest today. Every time we talk about these things, we put students out front first, which we should. But I'll tell you, the thing that keeps me awake at night are you people. And generally your livelihood and how that's related to this. So even when I don't say it in a public context that our employees are part of this, they truthfully are. There's a lot of people that depend on this organization, internally, externally, and I feel a tremendous amount of responsibility to keep that all in mind as we go through that. So personnel is a huge factor in the decision-making process.
Thank you. Okay, a couple questions back here. Where's Kim? Other
For everybody
side.
online, Kim's jogging.
She is actually running. That's awesome.
Okay. Whew. In the spirit of transparency and the duplication you were talking about, I'm just wondering to what extent conversations about consolidating academic programs has happened. So, for example, obviously both colleges have math departments, both have business departments, both have other things like that. Has there been conversation about that sort of consolidation where maybe only one college would have certain programs?
To be honest, Jessica, we've had those conversations in passing, but the topics that have lend themselves to an actual investigation and real analysis of that have not been academic programs. I think that, I know the Vice President of Instruction and Vice President of Learning is where that will start, and how we start looking at program vibe. Here's what I think will happen, or some important factors, and I say this without having, pulled this from any other leaders here, but it's looking at program viability as far as enrollments and graduations and job markets. It's also looking at capacity. If we have one program unenrolled and we have another program fully enrolled with people waiting to get in, like we need to capitalize on what's there for what's important for our region, as well as what we can get people through in a way that gets them to the right career. So yes, we need to look at program mix in a variety of ways. That has not started.
Okay, I think Bonnie's next.
Kim.
Kim.
Yay.
Just wanted to save you the trip. I know one question that comes up a lot is around the minimum operating allocation that the state gives, and we currently receive that twice, one for each college. And the concern is if we do any more consolidation, which we've already done quite a bit, right? We've been consolidated in HR, in a lot of places, facilities, IT, right? If we do more, will that threaten that allocation?
Yeah, it's a great question. I kind of forgot about that. I would have talked about it earlier. So the minimum operating allocation, as Bonnie has described, is every college gets that amount of money, which is sort of like, this is what you need to open your doors. And what it does is it equalizes things out for those small colleges who don't have economies of scale, and was part of the allocation model. It used to be 2.4 million, now it's 3. Patrick, Jenny, do you know? It's a little over 3. Anyways, it's a showstopper for that kind of consolidation. However, there's a few things that need to be looked at carefully. For those 3 multi-college districts in our state, Seattle has 3 colleges, all independently accredited. Spokane has 2 colleges independently accredited, but with consolidated services. Seattle, by the way, everybody's got their own foundation, IT, it's just all separate. And then Pierce College, which has 2 colleges, is singular accreditation with really integrated reporting and process and structural stuff. They're under single accreditation. And they get 2 minimum operating allocations. So it has to be addressed in a way that will ensure that we do not lose the minimum operating allocation for decades at least. And so as part of I think one of the first things that would go through the decision model is a repeat of the 2012 charge of should we be singular accredited or dual accreditation. We can pass out that report, but the minimum operating allocation has to be part of it. And I believe that the solution to that is that we would go to the president's committee and the operating budget committee, and we would ask for a written contract that we would maintain our 2 allocations, both of minimum operating and any provisos and earmarks that come out of the legislature in perpetuity. It's written in statute that we're 2 separate colleges, and that protects us as well. So I think there are ways to work around it, Bonnie, but it has to be locked tight to do that. Because if we lost $3 million in the effort to save money, it just doesn't work out.
Great question. Do we have more questions? Oh, there we go.
I just want to make sure that I'm really clear about this. So I thought I heard you say 2 things. First, you said in the vision that we are going to be one college. That seems like what the vision said. We're going to have one accreditation, et cetera. And then later on you said, we'll figure it out. Are you saying we're going to have one accreditation, one college, and we need to figure out how to do that? Or are you saying we're in an exploratory process of doing that? I think those are 2 very different things, and I'm unclear where we're at.
So I will be direct about it. I will say we're going to be one college, and that the process of getting to that design and organization will absolutely, there's going to be all kinds of things that we wrestle with. But until there's justification to change that vision, that's where we're going.
And accreditation is going to follow, we're going to be one accredited, or is that still in conversation and development?
Yeah, and I think that it's a very similar answer to what I just gave to Bonnie's question about the minimum operating allocation, which is if we have to work with the accrediting agency to say it would be best for us to be independent or singularly accredited. Tell us what that means, what are the risks, what are the liabilities of that, what would we have to do? And there's always, I don't want to sound like I'm backing off that vision, but everything we do, there's a chance it's going to change because we're making a better decision somewhere down the road. And I was kind of thinking about this when Jason asked a question yesterday to me of hey, didn't you say when you got here that why is it like this, and shouldn't it be a single college? Unlike what we do to people in media, people have the right to change their minds if there's a better way to adjust and pivot, right? And so I would say that this attempt to get us an organizational structure that fits the revenue that we have coming in is some process of trying to get to this goal, but finding the best way to get there. Remember I said earlier, we're asking you, how do we do this? And how we do this is identifying liabilities and rewards and risks and all those different things along the way, as well as figuring out how do we co-create it in a way that works for everybody. So,
Great question.
that'll be the question that exists throughout
Right.
the whole thing.
Are there more questions? I don't see any hands. Oh, here's a hand over here.
Word is over here.
Oh. Okay. Okay, we'll get back to you.
So at a past town hall, I thought that you said that you had spoken on behalf of our colleges to, I think, a cohort of college presidents and chancellors who were the ones who came up with the allocation model. And of course, the allocation model is pretty inequitable from our perspective, I think, because we serve such a broad range geographically and also income-wise, and just we have a really diverse population. But that didn't impact the way that the decision came down about that allocation model. So my question is, what makes you think that they would allow us to keep 2 allocations?
Because it's actually a separate question, Michelle. So, but let me answer the first part of that, and then I'll answer the final part, which is why would they allow us to keep both of those things? So, and both presidents, please jump in here if we want to cover some bases. But when we did the allocation model design, it was agreed upon that we would do it on a principle-based approach. And basically what that means is we're not going to put any money in this model until we've all agreed that these are the things that make the model equitable, which is good in principle, good on paper, didn't work out that way in execution. So, like, here's a great example, is there was a request to put continuing ed courses, well, actually, let's talk about international students. There was currently, the old model would allow you to account 2% of your international students into your general enrollment, and you get counted and get funded for them. That was done previously to help meet the legislature's target goals. It wasn't really about funding students, international students, because you can get money from them through contracts. But what was said was, hey, Walla Walla is never going to get a large number of international students, but King County will load up with them, and all of a sudden your small school is getting even more disadvantaged because they geographically cannot attract students. That both is in continuing ed and international students, and there was one other one that we kind of talked about not counting in a similar way. What I believe is the biggest problem with the model was that, you'll be surprised to hear that that's something to do with CTC Link, but the way everybody codes their students is inconsistent because of the 10-year implementation plan that had varying levels of success through the whole implementation. And so I'll use the one I think is the biggest one for us is ABE students previously were all counted, and when I say previously, I mean this is 10 years ago. If a student's enrolled, we would count them for 25 hours in a day. I'm looking at Jenny to keep nodding. In a week, sorry. That feels like a red flag when you're counting for 25 hours a day. So we would turn in these monitoring reports that said, hey, this student is signed up for 25 hours a week, regardless of whether she showed up for 1 or 20. And during the monitoring visits and reports, we always get those because we're a large college. So the state board is like trying to get more efficient and effective, come back to us and say, nope, you got to report true attendance. So we have 100 students who are actually taking 600 hours of, I'm just making stuff up. And then another college is still doing that. We're just counting 25 a week. they're exponentially getting counted for more students, more FTE than we are. And we got kind of killed in that. So what we did is we went back to the state board. So part of the allocation model was do no harm to, unintentionally. Well, the implementation brought some things out. And we went back and filed kind of a formal protest through a letter signed by Todd Woodard, our board chair, myself, the two presidents. And the state board has constituted a coding group that will look at and start to ensure that everybody codes, records, reports the same. That's going to take probably a year. I don't know why, but we have a very glimmer, like a little tiny bit of, I don't want to share too much hope, but there's a little bit of hope that there will be an adjustment to that in the coming year or 2 years. We think we are not quite getting counted right. We also, though, I got to say this, we got beat on enrollment by a lot of colleges across the state. So we were going to be on the giver's end of the money redistribution, but I think we got counted a little bit harder than we should have. Okay, so I'm going all the way back to your question, Michelle, is why do we think that they wouldn't take away the minimum operating allocation? Because when the presidents sit down on items like that, we do it through committee, and it would come up through, it would be largely non-controversial. And here's the other real leverage thing we have is, when the state legislature is saying to the whole system, hey, we're wanting to get rid of a community college, and we come in and say, look, we're consolidating and merging and giving you a good example to give to the legislature of how this works, we become the model of what people should do as opposed to the model of what they want to get rid of. And if the state board were to say, well, two things. If it were said that they would take it away, we would stop. If we did something and then they later tried to take it away, we would enlist the legislators of the entire eastern part of Washington. We'd be okay. We get it back. But I'm not doing it without a written agreement, a written legal agreement between us and the state board.
Okay, we have a question here still. Sir? Yes. Kim, down here. Yes.
Yeah, I'm kind of wondering what the purpose of having a new Spokane Falls president is if we're going to eliminate Spokane Falls as an independent entity. Now, I grant, since I've been here for a lot of years, on the average, our presidents have lasted 3 years. So maybe if you were thinking about, well, we're going to get a new president, they'll be gone in 3 years or thereabouts, then maybe it won't be a problem long term. But as an alternative, why not simply have the Spokane Community College president become at least an interim Spokane Falls president? Run the experiment of having one president with both campuses. Since we have somebody who's already very experienced, knows one campus, this would give us a clue, and we'd have another person who really knows in detail what the problems are on the two campuses.
Yeah, it's a great question, Ward. I can hear Jenny talking about quitting over here on the side. No, it's actually a great question. It's something I really thought about when I made the decision to look, we need to go out for a search for the Falls president. And here's the precise reasons why, is even if we're going to spend the next 5 years working through organizational changes, you need a point person leader at this institution. If we are going to live up to what I said earlier, which is if you value what you think is unique here, you want to integrate that into the process, you're still going to need a primary leader here who helps your vision, represents you at cabinet, brings forward those things that are important pieces of belonging to you. And so I think it would look, actually the perception would be that the whole thing was loaded to the SCC side. There's already perceptions about that, and I just don't want that. I want us to be working through it as a group that feels equally represented. And I've already decided that when that, and I've talked to people who are interested in the job, and I've said, look, I want you to understand that there's some instability there. I don't know how we're getting through the next 5 years. Your position is, if you're coming here to live for 30 years and, you know, buy a ranch and do all that stuff, I don't know that I can promise you that experience. So I think it is important, if not critical, that Spokane Falls is represented by their choice of who the president can be that will lead them through that process. You're going to need a leader. And I think that will be critical.
Okay, Jeff, you've got one online.
Yes, thank you. So we have a couple of questions, one on the process, and I think you addressed this up front, Chancellor Brockbank. When will this process begin, and can you give us an overview of the process?
Yeah, I'll give I think I can answer most of that. By Monday, I want to have, you know, hard copy documents out that explain the model a little bit more in detail, which will also have a little bit of a tentative timeline. As you all recognize, we're running up against the end of the academic year, which changes the available participants and the work. And so there's a couple things that we can do, or I intend to do with that model in the short time frame, as well as how do we get to next fall. Next fall is when we will really be working at a higher pace and filling that model up with not only challenges that fit in with the fiscal adjustments, but also the strategic plan should be approved, and we'll be needing to work some things through that as well. So there'll be a timeline in there, and we're going to pick a couple of things to work through the model in the interim. One that is really based on staff work that doesn't affect faculty work or daily faculty work, so it won't look like I know we always get this, that we did it over the summer so that the faculty couldn't participate in that. We're going to pick some things that don't apply. And then also maybe one thing that's just a really quick win. And then the big thing we'll start in the fall would be the one that Bonnie brought up as far as accreditation and the minimum operating allocation. How do we do that? And what are the risks there? So there'll be a little bit of a timeline in that. And then it will. And then how does it get started? Is that the other part of it?
What's the process and when will it start? So I think you answered it.
The process to start will look a lot like a regular task force work group. What you'll see in there is if you really kind of look beyond the rich descriptions in it, you'll see a very similar thing to what we do already, which is, what's the first thing we do when we need a committee on a problem? We have somebody write a charge, right? Well, the design team will write the charge with a specific group of folks who are subject matter experts, and we'll get the charge going based on a template. The work group will provide recommendations and analysis and answer the charge, and then our steering committee will look at that and say, how does that fit into the overall organizational work? And so if you look at that, a task force works in a similar way, but the other part that we'll have is I'm really committed to the fact that all the work we do, the work of the design team should be in a document that's on the SharePoint site. The work that the working group does should be on the SharePoint site. Every iteration and every movement through that model should be documented, saved, and available publicly in perpetuity. And the other part that will be in there will be a written decision of why and how and the elements used to make the decision, because for two reasons. One is that there are going to be times when the recommendations aren't exactly what's accepted. That just happens sometimes. But also, I think we have too much of a reliance on storytelling history here about how and why we did things. That's not a very good record-keeping system. And so everything we do in this, I want to be able to be referenced back by everybody in our district.
There are a couple more. One similarly related. If there's a decision to become Spokane Colleges, how would essentially the brand structure work? Would there be both colleges named Spokane Community College or Spokane Falls Community College or something else?
In my mind, it stays the same. The most drastic change I don't even know if you have to make this. It's a Spokane Falls campus versus a Spokane Falls college. I think you just leave it the same. I said it earlier, and I really believe this, is prospective students don't really look at the org structure, the org chart when they're getting ready to come here. Parents don't either. What they care about is what you all do when they walk in the door, how it's represented in the community, what's the story being told by the student who just graduated and Running Start. Those are the things that create the identity. The things that we did with the rebrand accurately represent us. They're really well received in the community. Spokane Falls Community College and Spokane Community College are going to remain elements of our naming and branding system. I don't think we save money by changing any of that, and nor does it change our operational efficiency.
One more. Have there been any discussions with our K-12 partners about future programs surrounding dual credit programs?
Yeah, I think, of course, the biggest one is the Trades High School and how we'll implement that partnership. We've got a lot of work to do there. There's always active conversations. I think that's probably a better question for like Guillermo or Brenda that work with those partners every day. I will say probably the biggest thing that I have concerns about now, and got a phone call into President McMahon at Eastern again, but is that Eastern had published at some time the intention to pursue the ability to award the associate's degree again. And as you might imagine, that's a disincentive for students to come here versus Eastern in a Running Start program. That was previously presented to us in a different administration at Eastern as a, no, we're never going to advertise it. That's just a recovery thing for credits. We very clearly said that's not true and not at all accurate. That's absolutely a ploy to draw more Running Start students in. And we know that we rely very heavily on Running Start. I think Patrick you say it's 30% here. Yeah, and a quarter. And then it continues to grow at SEC as well. I don't, okay. No quizzes. But that's something we have to work on carefully, and I'll be working with President McMahon again, something that she at one point said they wouldn't do, and now we're back to that point again. But the Trades High School and Eastern's associate's degree are the two bigger elements right now of dual enrollment. I think one of the things that's not mentioned in the discussion we're having today about how do we get to the place where organizations are right is it's going to take a lot of partnerships. We need to leverage against anybody who's got things that contribute to us positively, resources, knowledge, revenue, advertising, like partnerships are going to be really important for us going forward.
Do we have other questions? Yeah. Well, let's ask Tim Rowe's question first. Oh, yeah. Should we do that? Okay. Yeah. So Tim Rowe submitted a question in BPAC, which is the Budget Planning Administration Committee? Advisory Committee, BPAC. In BPAC this year, we discussed how staffing levels of different job classifications have changed at both colleges and the district over the past several years. Can you speak to how you have used that data and how you're reviewing staffing decisions for the different job classifications moving forward?
Yes, this is a good question. For anybody who hasn't been there, we kind of worked over this a few different ways. It was brought up, and what it looked like based on the snapshot of comparison was that in the last 10 years, from 2016, 17 to 24, 25, so last 9 academic years, the staffing had changed to the point where about 2% of faculty positions went down by 2%, or like maybe 6 individuals, and exempt and admin positions went up 58%. And so we just weren't really sure if that was right, and we were kind of looking at it together. And so what we did is went back to the CTC Link system to try to see it. It didn't work, and what we had to have administrators do at each college and district is look at every single thing on there and try to determine, was it accurate, was it filled, was it not filled, is it, what happened. And so the accurate representation of that was what I said earlier, is the faculty had a decline in overall faculty positions of 2%, and admin and exempt were actually up about 30%. So there is truth in the rumor that those positions did increase over time. And we asked them to go, administrators to go through every single one of those and justify how and why those were. The 58% shows us a couple of things. And one is that the CTC link on a snapshot in time like that is not the right kind of data to have front-facing. And one great example of that was it takes a snapshot in 2016-17 at a time when the Spokane Falls Student Services Vice President was empty, so it looked like when that was hired in 24, when it was full in 24-25, it looked like that was an increase, and it wasn't. That being said, here's my 4 takeaways from this staffing review. First of all, our data dashboards need to be reviewed and cleaned up so that we do not have inaccurate information out there. The second one I just mentioned, but I'm going to say it the way I wrote it, is during the 10-year period, faculty positions went down by about 2% and admin exempt positions went up by about 30%. We figured that out through a manual review process. But what I think we have to look at going forward is this, is what that shows is what happened and what decisions were made over the last 9 to 10 years and how we staffed at that time for that group. And if we want to try to readjust to that time, that would be a mistake because we'd be adjusting for what we were doing in 2016-17. What we're trying to adjust to is what are we doing in fiscal year 2034. And so I think it's important to look at how we reallocate individuals and positions and how and why they're there. There's a lot of provisos and special projects and Title IX and requirements that created some of those new positions. But also really carefully evaluating those as they go through. But as we compare staffing and positions right now, back to kind of Jessica's question about like programs and staffing and all things, that's about what are we staffing for right now, what are we staffing for over the next 5 to 6 years, and what makes us a great organization going forward. I think that's brought out some things we need to watch for, but I'm not going to try to staff back to 2016-17 because that's not what we're doing. So a couple ways to look at that.
Thanks. Jeff's got another question.
As positions become vacant and responsibilities continue to grow across the institution, what is Spokane Colleges doing to ensure employees remain well supported and able to sustainably do the work?
I mentioned earlier, I do think about that a lot, and I rely on other people to kind of carry that out for me, honestly. There's a bunch of things here that I think are really important to me, and I don't do anything about it. It's somebody else's work. I will tell you that we're getting really close to having some great kind of breakthroughs on some things that will benefit some of our parents in our district as far as with potential partial coverage for daycare and some other pieces. So we're working on some things there. I would just say, too, that personal health and well-being is critically important. And I share with my team all the time, like, there are no real emergencies in higher ed. There's 2. One is anything that we have to call security. That's an emergency, which basically none of us are responsible for. And federal financial aid getting distributed the first day of the quarter. Those 2, right? Everything else has some shelf life of being able to walk backwards. And I try really hard not to call in the evenings or on the weekends. People need relief. And I think we have, in places, there are different adjusted schedules that work because of the jobs that you have. That's a really comprehensive question that I don't think I can answer accurately, but I will say that it is, I think, a very clear message for me, always has been over the last 3 years, is that it's important to take care of our people. And I hope most supervisors carry that out. And there's not always 100% perfection in that, but I ask people to pay attention to how people are doing and know that when you feel good, your day at work is better. But that's a hard question to answer, honestly.
Okay.
It's always at the forefront of what we're thinking about, though.
Thanks. Okay, we're looking for rumors, too. If anyone has a rumor they want to test out. Oh, a hand went up on that.
Oh, no. Hand came up fast.
I know. She's got one.
We've been talking a lot today about budget cuts.
Yeah.
And pulling back. But what about bringing in and marketing? The rumors that we've heard this year is that we did a lot less outreach. I had somebody from North Central say that they never even got visited by SFCC, again, rumor. And I know the fact is that other institutions are also trying to get students and go through this. And we lost 4 students that could have come here right from our own backyard, Cheney, to Rochester Institute of Technology. So what are we doing about marketing and bringing in and our enrollment increasing instead of just focusing on cuts?
I'll let you answer the first part, and then I'll add on to it.
Okay. Well, each college has their own outreach team, so we'll start there. And SFCC has fewer people working on outreach than SCC does. I know that's something that's on President McEachern's mind. As far as marketing overall goes, we have a number of overarching campaigns that we do throughout the year to promote workforce. Right now, we're getting ready to start the second workforce campaign. We did a workforce campaign last fall on healthcare to really position us as the leader in workforce in this region. This new one is manufacturing and STEM. So again, highlighting the different paths you can take, come to our college, basically get in and get out. Get in, get what you need, and get out. That is what people want these days, and so that is what those workforce campaigns are focused on. We also do transfer, because transfer is bread and butter, especially for SFCC, as well as Running Start. So we have these overarching programs that go throughout the year, different times of the year. In fact, Kim and Jeff and I were just sitting down yesterday talking about where we're headed, kind of the plan going forward, as well as a whole bunch of secondary campaigns, we're calling them. Like right now, we're running a campaign specifically for graphic design to try to get students into that program so that we don't lose that program, because it's a great program. It's a staple in this community for years. So we get lots of requests like that too.
So this, actually, I told Melanie this when we hired her. I said, every spring you get that question, and you have to answer it in a way that shows the evidence of what's going on, partially because, I don't see it either in some cases, but I also am not the target market. So the reels I watch at night don't have a lot of stuff interjected in there, but it is I will say, I've been pretty clear, I think, the entire time I've been chancellors. I want us to be as aggressive as we can from a marketing perspective, and we'll spend the money to do it. But we also need to be able to tell our internal audience a little bit, and we just talked about this the other day, what we're doing if they can't see it. The one thing you can see is billboards, but billboards don't really drive students, right? Like a lot of times we buy billboards for awareness. So we'll have more information coming out that kind of will say specifically, this is what we do, and this is what you see, and this is what you don't see. Along with that, I will say, the other thing I've been asking about and trying to work on is the idea that all the higher ed institutions in our region and Washington region, coming together and working on a campaign that talks about why the statement that says you don't have to go to college is misleading. And I don't disagree with that statement. There's a lot of ways you can fulfill your dreams and what your vision is and those types of things. But when you imply that college is not worth it, that's false. And I say it to anybody at any time, anywhere. And especially because most of the time when you hear the statement, college is not necessary for everybody, it's coming out of the mouth of somebody who has a master's degree or a doctorate. And we've kind of sat around, as higher ed has for years, and kind of let us just continue to get punched in the mouth with that and just going like, it's okay. I'm over it. I said it earlier. The most important thing we do here is educate people. So we have an educated society making educated decisions. And as we continue to say this isn't worth it, I just don't agree for a second. And what I want, and I think I have this kind of figured out how it would work, is I want us and Eastern and Whitworth and Gonzaga to say, if you're in this region, higher ed's important, and here's why. You have health care, you retire, you are less likely to be subject to economic wavering in your employment. It's real easy to say not everybody needs to go to college, but what you need to do is back it up with some evidence. Here's the one I love is, well, Bill Gates didn't go to college. He did go to college, he didn't get a degree. And you know how many Bill Gates there are? One. But I can look around anywhere and find somebody with a bachelor's degree who's killing it. So that's clearly a personal gripe. But I think we need to do that, especially in the rurals where we see enrollment and participation going way down. But just in our region, as we continue to see the need for skilled adults being met with non-college going individuals. Like, we're not tying the two things together. And so that has to be part of it too.
Okay. She got another one?
Yep.
Or is follow-up?
Kind of a follow-up to
Okay.
that. We have, I'm sure at SCC too, I just know about SFCC. HIS is here, orthotics, prosthetics, ASL, interpreter and education. We're the only ones in the entire state. We're also accessible via online. So instead of just thinking regionally, why are we not pushing for more vision statewide? I don't know how many times I've heard people say, I didn't even know you guys existed. And that's a true, it's truly horrible to think that people don't even know we're out there when we're the only ones in the whole state. And if I may brag, I think they're really good programs and provide need. I know in our area we have, we're critical. We need more interpreters in the educational field. And there's lots of deaf students out there without anybody. HIS, we just have so many great programs, and I just feel like they're not marketed as they ought to be or could be. And they would bring in, when they bring in to those programs, they have to take English, they have to take math, they have to take social sciences, so it helps all of us.
So one of the challenges with that is the number of programs we have, and if we were focused just on one, like on an ASL, we could push it out that far. If we do it with each program, we wouldn't get very far with it. We just wouldn't, the resources wouldn't go far enough. So oftentimes we advertise by sectors with some emphasis on individual programs, but it is always a challenge for us to get the perfect marketing for one program and leave another one out. It's a constant struggle. And so there's never a great answer for that, but I think we try as hard as we can to broadcast that out, knowing that we have regional plans, especially in healthcare, that serve more than Eastern Washington. Jenny's got a response for it too. And I'll let you pick it up there because you're more in the middle of that right now than I am.
Yeah, so it's a great question. So similar at SCC, we have some programs that are leaders in our state and regionally, even West Coast, just as I know Spokane Falls has programs like that. One of the challenges in some block type marketing across the state is we do have agreements with our other 34 community and technical colleges that we only market it in our service area. So that is an agreement that we have, although there are some ways to work through individual programs, but that it gets tricky. It is a challenge because I will say we've had other colleges come into our service area with their programs, and I can tell you what our response has not been quite as nice. I know VPs call other VPs, and we say we have this agreement. But that said, I think some of the strength for us at Spokane Colleges in both campuses is the depth and breadth of programming that we offer and some really unique programs that serve Spokane, the counties we serve, as well as the region. And so it's tricky, but there might be some opportunity for us to combine in some things like that.
Can I jump in real quick? Yep. So another opportunity there is our new websites, right? We're getting ready to launch new websites. And one of the things we've been working really hard on is search. the SEO and the GAO and all the searches, the way people search. So if they're online and they're searching for these programs, that we end up at the top of the list. So that's another piece that the team is working on, and most people go to the websites first for information. So that's, we don't need to worry about regional agreements if they're the ones seeking us out. Yeah, sorry.
Yeah. Well, Jenny's comments reminded me of another thing that we talked about the other day, and I think it ties into a comment earlier. I think there's always been a level of kind of collegial agreement that we're not poking at each other with our neighborhood higher ed partners, and in particular probably talking about Eastern and us. Those days are over. The fact of the matter is
Christine's brand new from Eastern.
From Eastern. We do have the most affordable pathway to a higher ed credential. We do have the best faculty. We do have the most access. We do have the most people come out of here and move into careers. Somebody provide me an opposite argument. And why we don't say that, and why we don't push market or the dollar amounts that students will get. We're in a recruitment business. I was thinking about this on the way to work this morning, actually, which is, in my mind, marketing and advertising are one thing. Recruiting is different. And we need to change our message into a recruiting thing. Why do you want to be here? I want to be here because I want to be with the best faculty member. I want to be here because that's the dollar amount I want to make. I want to come there because that's the least expensive way to get what I want. Like, I don't know why we would apologize anymore for being awesome. And I think we want to get more aggressive about that going forward.
All right, great. Do we have any celebrations? We'll take rumors and questions too. Oh, there we go.
So I'm hearing about the agreements with the other 34 CTCs. Rumor I've heard periodically over time is NIC is slowly creeping into areas that maybe impact our service area. Do we have agreements with our cross-border neighbors over in Coeur d'Alene at NIC?
No. And I think when I talk about being aggressive about marketing and stuff too, I think that I actually spent 2 hours with their president yesterday at the end of the day. I'm just sort of a collegial, like, hey, we don't know each other. I went to Coeur d'Alene. They have some cool stuff going on. I mean, I'm not going to lie to you. Like but they're also dealing with a much smaller scale. I think it's a reason to move. But I don't think that the state line will be any sort of deterrent for them to pursue revenue in continuing ed courses, corporate training, workforce, and I'm not so sure that they might not even take a look at how they get into the high schools, and the college and the high school. I'm speculating there, but also when I talk about this whole 5 years, how do we get better? We're going to be kind of in a constant, continuous improvement state. So if we have somebody retire and we think like, I don't know, maybe we can get by without having that position, that doesn't mean that we just all do more. It means we got to work smarter, right? Like you have to work. We have to figure out, are there ways to use AI or partnerships or whatever else there is? Like just doing the same thing won't get us ahead. And when you have, and I'm making an assumption here, let's just say you have an innovative person in your region that are competing with you, then we got to be better than them as well. And so it's not just a matter of like, oh, we got to take care of the budget. We've got to be more aggressive at the same time. So tall task, but we've got a great group. I think we'll be okay.
Jeff's got another question.
Along the lines of partnerships, as Spokane Colleges explores enrollment strategies, have there been conversations about developing transfer partnerships with HBCUs or HSIs to strengthen pathways and attract new students?
It's been talked about before, but I don't think we've ever actually gotten one completed. I think that the thing that there has been some work on is providing the opportunity for some students to go to the conference in Seattle where those organizations or those institutions are represented. And I think that's been a great experience for a lot of students, but we do not have transfer agreements, and there's probably would be totally doable moving forward.
Other questions? Rumors, celebrations? Kim's moving.
Michelle.
So I guess I'm wondering what has changed. So a few months ago, I was in a board meeting, Board of Trustees meeting, and I heard you say that all the things were on the table, like having the two colleges be just the two colleges and maybe eliminating the district were on the table. So I'm wondering what changed from all the options are on the table to let's be one college. What happened in between and why?
Yeah, there's been a long circular conversation about that, Michelle, and it's one of those things that changes depending on what's happening. What we've gone through since that time is we have completed the budget for the year minus adjustments. We got through that, and I think that was a huge relief to most of us who feel responsible for that. But we also, as I mentioned earlier, we've had some task forces over the course of the last 10 months try to work through some of those consolidation questions. And one of the most glaring pieces of it, and I think there's a consensus on this of people who've read it, is that because of the current structure, that there's an undertone in there that without a target or a goal to work towards, it's really hard for people to make pointed, clear, and maybe even transformational recommendations. And so what we were giving these work groups, and we'd be giving other work groups without that vision, is an equation to solve with no endpoint. And so we have to set ourselves a target for the work and say, this is what we're trying to do. And if it can't be done, then there's got to be an adjustment in the path as well. But mostly what's changed is we completed that, and I think I'll leave it for any member of the cabinet to answer this, but I don't think we can just squeeze this budget anymore and make it through another year. We have to do it as a truly collaborative group whose destiny is tied together. And what we did this year, again, when things got really tough, is we all kind of retreated to our spots and did our piece and brought it back together. We won't get there that way next year without some really poor decisions and short-term solutions. And so we have to get more aggressive about giving our group and participatory and shared governance the tools needed to give recommendations that will work or that will point us in the right direction. So that's what's changed for me, is just knowing that the current methodology of working through it is run its course. And so we have to try something different.
Sounds like Jeff's got another question.
Yeah, I'm just full of questions. This is more of a comment from the chat. One of my concerns is persistent focus on reorganization at the colleges and the district level, and how much attention and focus it is taking. It really doesn't feel like a growth-focused trajectory.
Yeah, I think that's a fair thing to say. I think I mentioned at the beginning, I just sitting around yesterday, like, I don't really want to start with that topic at all. I'm over it, and there's no fun in it. I don't know how everybody else feels about working in higher ed, but working in higher ed for most of my career was really fun. Even the hard stuff wasn't as hard as what we're doing right now. Being around students is fun. Being in the classroom and watching teaching and learning is fun. What we're being challenged with right now is not fun. Like I find very little joy in accomplishing these tasks. I want to spend the day working on things that are meaningful and rewarding and provide me personal joy. The legislature and the budget do not do that for me. But these are things that when we go to this other part of the equation, which is there's an expectation here, and we continue to talk about transparency and information sharing and communication. And unfortunately, the budget is really one of the highest priorities right now because everything else is tied to it. What we can do in programming, what we can do with personnel, what we can do with those things is really important. And we've had many years where I think we can just ride through. We could count on the federal government to fund these different things. We could count on the state government to fund these other things. We're not there. And if I don't make sure that I tell you exactly what's happening, there's an entirely different sort of comment or response we get, which is, you're not telling us what's going on. So I feel responsible and obligated to tell you that transparency covers all topics. And this one is important. And the other thing I will pull back on why I really needed to concentrate on today is a little bit of a call to service on this, which is these are co-creating sort of designs and problems. Like I said, if you value a certain piece of uniqueness of where you work and what's going on, I want you to get involved because I want you to have the opportunity to tell us why that's important. So both of those things are important.
We have time for maybe one or two more questions, rumors, celebrations. Anyone have a celebration? It'd be really nice to hear that. Okay. Hold on. Let's get the microphone.
Oh, okay. All right, let's
sorry.
celebrate then. Last week, we had our student leaders and French Club and Black Student Union that organized a meeting to memorialize the Tuskegee Airmen from Spokane, and we had representatives from our state. We had people from the community that joined, and we are moving forward with this, and this is fantastic to see our students being in position of leadership and accomplishing great things. So I'm looking forward, and I know some of you will receive more emails about what the next steps will be.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing.
And this Friday, we will be having our 14th annual interview day with our interpreter training program students. It's kind of like speed dating interviews, and each student is guaranteed 5 interviews for the day, and it's from all across the state. So we do both online, on ground, and our interviewers show up online and on ground. So we're pretty tickled about that we've been able to keep that going. And then I have a comment. Okay. Is that okay? You have the microphone. Oh, I do, don't I? Okay. So here you go, ready or not. You might want to sit down. No, just kidding. My question is, okay, so we buy into this budget crisis business, and we do our very best to reduce, reuse, and recycle, et cetera, et cetera. We've got 7 years of this. What is going to prevent us from going through this again? We are so dependent upon GA, government assistance, for our life to run here. Why isn't it a case of, and maybe we can't have funding so we don't have these situations happen with maybe rainy day accounts or that kind of thing? What can we do to get ourselves up and away from GA?
Great question. There's no guarantee that we won't have to go through this again or in some other form. I talked about earlier about the unknowns, but I also was talking about how important it's going to be for advocacy as we get into getting closer to the next legislative session in the fall. There's just going to be legislators here all the time, and they might not even be our legislators, but that's the first thing is our legislators. It's very interesting in the last session that some of our longtime supporters were coming to messages and bills and amendments and provisos that were really questioning the size and effectiveness of our system. If our supporters are saying it, people all across the floor are saying it. So we have got to, and we have some great tools, economic impact statements about what the value is to our community. We have tremendous student stories. We have all the different things, but when we schedule legislators on campus, Like, I need people to show out for that and to be real champions of our college and the community. And I think it might go back to this too, which is like, hey, when we market and we start putting that together and say, look, I'm not embarrassed to say that we're the most affordable access point for higher ed in this region. And people should know that. Like Easton's great, does great things. We do things better than anybody in the things we do. And here's the other part that people need to recognize too is, we don't get compared to the four-year institutions because we stay right where we need to be to do right what we need to do, and we do it great. We sometimes get lost between K-12 and the four-year system, but our focus on what we're good at is how we stay into that. And the other thing is the social narrative on higher ed has to change, which is where I got fired up about the whole, you don't need to go to college. Okay, you don't have to go to college, but if you're not sure what you're doing, the odds are that college is the most successful route. So we have to do it as a group to kind of be advocates and champions.
Okay, we're at our final closing question for you. As we close out this academic year and looking back, what are a few things you're most proud of?
I think it's pretty simple, and I kind of started to touch on it for a second there. Like, hey, so this year has been, I don't know how everybody's experienced the year. It's different in all different offices and areas and classrooms and those different things. But in my office and my daily, it's just crisis mode every single second. New executive order, funding got lost for this, we're in trouble for that. This isn't going right. This data point doesn't look right. Like, it just was a series of those things. But what I appreciate, and I think was my biggest takeaway from this year, wasn't fun, but it was just the resilience of the people who are doing the right kind of work. And that's, executive assistants I'm around, people working in facilities, faculty that we're working with. Like, it just is, it happens over and over and over again. And it's sometimes easy to not see that in the big picture, but when you start looking back and reflecting on how much we've waded through over the last, since July of last year, is you could write a book on it, and that's what resilience is about, and we'll need more of that going forward because we have some tough stuff to handle. But I think we have the right people in place. We've got some new people in place that I'm excited about as well, and that resilience will carry us through. That is one of the things that's always kind of characterized this district, whether it's at the Falls or at SCC, is I've seen a lot of bumps over the last 11 years here, and you just keep chipping away at it, and we end up being fine. And I think that will be good for us. I want to mention one other thing. I was just thinking as a plug that more people will hear here is, so each year at Convocation, each of the last 2 years, didn't get a speaker to come in nationally. Not going to do that again. We're going to do the same thing we've done the last 2 years. We're going to have students come and talk to us. And the first year we did students who were able to identify real big obstacles they overcame. And I think we had a trustee, and we had adults who were accomplished and successful. The second year, which was last year, we had graduates who were business owners, and that was awesome. That group was incredible. This year, what I want to do, and I want to do this in order to kind of assist the foundation in their effort to kick off their employee giving campaign, but I want you to help us identify students who have come here, been successful, but the foundation was a really critical component of their success. Many of you refer students to the Foundation for Emergency Aid or scholarship or whatever else, and I'll bet you there's a million stories that I'll never hear about that, but some of you have talked to have watched the foundation save students. I'd love for us to identify 4 people or 4 students from there. So if you have one of those students for us to connect with, Victoria Bjordahl, right over here, or Dee Bland can take those, and we'll start collecting and start working on that. But the students are the best part of that day, honestly.
Agreed. Well, thank you everyone for being here. I hope you have a great rest of your day and week and academic year. Thanks.